come, come, whoever you are. Do you hear that voice calling you, calling us? That voice which calls us together here today in this room, made holy by your presence. That voice which calls us to remember that we are not alone, but that we are interwoven with all life. And just as we have been called together here today, we act as the voice, the heart, the hands of another call. The call to walk with the wanderers, sing and dance with the worshipers, proclaim the memory of those who have taken their leave, wrap the despairing and the broken in the arms of love and community. For this, we are here together today. So my friends, come, yet again come. Come, let us worship together. Dear God, Spirit of love, the light of many names, we ask that you be with us this morning as we enter into this time of meditation and prayer. Be with us as we reawaken that quiet part of ourselves that whispers to be heard. Today we ask that you help us put aside our worry, our anxiety, our fear, so that we may be fully present to the love that knows no end. We ask that you open our eyes to the pain of our neighbor. That you open our ears to the cries of those who are hurting. That you guide our hands as we work to help the broken. That you remind us of all of who we are and what we're truly meant to do. Let us now enter into a time of shared silence. This morning I would like to share with you all 3 readings, one from each of the Abrahamic faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I'd like you to take a moment and listen to these sacred words that speak of openness to the other, of kindness to our neighbor, and the importance of listening. The first is from the Hebrew Bible, Proverbs 18:2-13. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion. If one gives answer before hearing, it is folly and shame. The second is from the Christian Bible, Matthew 7:12. So in everything, do to others that you would have them do unto you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. And the final is from the Islamic scripture, Quran 41:34. And not equal are the good deed and the bad. Repel evil with good, and the person who is your enemy becomes like an intimate friend. The cafeteria was noisy, obnoxious, and as usual, way too hot. I walked my anxiety-ridden 13-year-old self through the front door and got into the cafeteria line. As I waited for my greasy bacon burger with tater tots, I began to feel that familiar nagging thought. who would I sit with today? Will that group of cool kids over there make fun of me if I try to sit with them? Probably. Maybe I should just play it safe and go sit with Rodney, Steve, and Rami. Clearly they're the nerds, but as the new kid in town, I guess so am I. After my tray was unceremoniously filled with something that almost resembled nutrition, I made my way over to the nerd table. But after I sat down, the cool kids walked over. It seemed that they were looking for some fun as they came over to engage in a little lunchtime sport. They made their way through us one by one, laughing and insulting us in any way they knew how. You know, I remembered this game. Last year, before I moved to this town, I was often on the other end of it. It seemed so innocent at the time. Well, it didn't now. Finally, they got to Rami. They were thrown off. You know, he didn't look like the other Italian or Irish Catholic kids that dominated this small Massachusetts town. What exactly are you? They said. You know, Rami just stared straight ahead. I mean, you aren't black, right? Wait, another kid chimed in. Are you Muslim? When Rami made eye contact for the first time, they knew they were onto something. So wait, you don't even have Christmas? I mean, who's your priest? Gandhi? That bum with the rags and the glasses? The guy that lets everyone beat him up? They all laughed. And Rami just stared straight ahead and quietly ate his food. Finally, they went away. Well, over the next several months, Rami and I became friends. Eventually, he told me that his family had emigrated from Iran and that he was, in fact, Muslim. And Rami was the first person I remember meeting that was Muslim. When Ramadan came, Rami educated me about why he was forbidden to eat during that day. While it seems, a bit strange to me, he seemed to enjoy the specialness of this month. When I was first invited over Rami's house, his mom made us the most amazing plates filled with falafel and all the fixins. I could see how they were so devoted to celebrating their customs and their faith. I was actually kind of envious of their deep spiritual practice, something I missed in my often far too humanist UU upbringing. Now, looking back, it was such a blessing to be introduced to Islam in this manner. Rami's family painted a warm and welcoming picture of their faith, one that was far more accurate than any stereotype or caricature. But there at school, Rami was quickly identified by others as Muslim, something different, something strange, something to be feared. He was made aware on a daily basis of this difference, something the other white Catholic kids didn't have to deal with. We often think of our identity as something that makes us special, but for those in the minority, it can often feel like a burden. That's no more true than it is today, when hate crimes against American Muslims are at an all-time high, when mosques are being targeted by our government as terrorist training camps, when immigration has been banned from 6 Muslim-majority countries, despite the long legal challenge. Those of the Islamic faith have been deemed to be the other, something to be afraid of. We seem content to use identity as a blunt instrument to knock out any who we see as a threat, rather than engage in thoughtful discussion about our similarities and our differences. Our fears have been ginned up, and our biases have been reinforced. I want to pause for a moment and consider our reading this morning from Proverbs. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion. If one gives answer before hearing, it is folly and shame. This verse, which is thousands of years old, seems to be written exclusively for us today. Take a look at your Facebook or Twitter feeds, and you'll see countless examples of fools who take no pleasure in understanding, only in expressing their personal opinion. Turn on any news channel, any hour of the day, and you'll hear commentators who give answer before hearing. Try talking to your coworker about the state of the world, and they'll likely do their best impression of the talking heads on their screen. Will begin ranting with folly and shame. From a distance, this complete lack of curiosity for the other, this absence of even an attempt to learn from one another, it almost seems silly. And it would be silly if it weren't so dangerous. For sadly, it seems that our public discourse has become painfully one-sided. Through posting and texting, we've become trained to state our opinion not to a person, but to a screen. That screen doesn't talk back to us. That screen doesn't look at us with confused eyes. That screen doesn't become angry. That screen doesn't cry. Now, our modern forms of communication have taught us to become fools who take no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion. And as a result, much of our communication these days lacks basic empathy for the other. In seminary, I took this class. It was called Topics in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Relations. It was co-taught by a Jewish professor, a Christian professor, and a Muslim professor. In this class, we engaged in ways to establish and maintain meaningful interfaith dialogue. And one obstacle to this work that we learned about is our innate proclivity toward tribalism. Tribalism is what we call our natural tendency to trust those who we perceive as similar and fear those who we think of as different. To fully comprehend how deeply seated this problem is, we watched this scientific experiment. People were placed into a CAT scan machine to monitor their brain activity. Then they were showed an image of a hand being painfully injected. Well, the CAT scan was able to show how the image affected the pain centers of their brain. When the person saw the image, their pain centers lit up as if they were the one who, in fact, were receiving this painful injection. But for the next round, they showed each subject the exact same image of the hand being injected, but this time with a word under the image: Christian, or Jewish, or Muslim. Same word, but now with an identity attached to it. And across the board, when the word described the test subject's own religion, the CAT scan registered higher pain activity in each test subject's brain. Christian showed more pain activity when the word was Christian. Muslim showed more pain activity when the word was Muslim. And while the CAT scan revealed far less pain activity when the word was of a group that was different from the test subjects. This research study showed clearly that the test subjects were feeling more empathy for those who they perceived to be similar to them. And the most discouraging thing about this was that it was happening within a fraction of a second, before the test subject could even process why they were reacting this way. Now, this experiment left me feeling rather hopeless. What chance do we have of truly feeling compassion for the other when our brains immediately decide who is worthy of that love? Now, I understand where this trait might have come from evolutionarily. I get how it's a survival advantage to be walking through the jungle and to be able to immediately decide who's friend or foe, who's trying to kill us versus who's just trying to say hello. I understand why we evolved this way. But watching us experiment, it made me understand why interfaith dialogue is so challenging. For this work requires us to rewire our brains to a place where we can acknowledge our initial apprehension for the other, and then to actively and intentionally move to a place of openness and kindness. In our reading this morning from the book of Matthew, so in everything do to others that you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. And often we only think about why we do something. But this passage asks us to consider the other's feelings. If you were on the receiving end of your action, how would that make you feel? This passage invites us to rework our brain's default mode of focusing on ourselves to one of humility and empathy. When you shunned the other, how did that make you feel? How would you feel if they shunned you? In Lawrence N. Will's book, Not God's People, he deconstructs how, why, and where the idea of the other comes from. He states, the construction of the other serves to construct the we. The social practices that hold society together are affirmed by the we, while their opposites, which threaten to destroy social bonds, are projected onto the other. Essentially, he's saying that without a common enemy or an other, we would not exist. To have an inside group, you must have an outside group. In this configuration, we all share good, common, ethical values, while they are opposite to us and will destroy our values. They are the enemy. Or as he writes, quote, the other has the ability to corrupt or infect the we, and the we is vulnerable. He says the depiction of the other is often unreal, it's distorted, monstrous, mythical, even taboo, while in reality, human beings exhibit multiple and nested identities. Constructing someone as the other erases all of those identities and replaces them with one inaccurate identity. For sure, today it is easy to paint Islam with the other brush. We are good, God-fearing, decent people who just want safe neighborhoods and good schools. They are the ones who come to take it away. We have good, old-fashioned American values. They want to impose Sharia law on all of us. We are kind and peaceful. They want to bomb us out of existence. Does any of this sound familiar? But as Lawrence Wills reminds us, this simple narrative is unreal. It's distorted, making Islam into something monstrous, mythical, and taboo. I mean, the othering of Islam has been done so effectively that otherwise intelligent, thoughtful people come to me and tell me things like, well, you know, the Quran is filled with violent and hateful rhetoric. It's not like our Bible that is filled with love and compassion. But the reality is that there are vengeful and violent parts included in the Hebrew, Christian, and Islamic scriptures. If you look hard enough, you will find things that you don't like in each of these holy books. That certainly doesn't make the entire faith violent. Angry fundamentalists are found on the fringes of every religion, but they are not representative of the whole. For in reality, ISIS represents Islam about as well as the KKK represents Christianity. You know, in my initial study of the Quran, I found that it's filled with verses filled with love and compassion. It's filled with stories we would recognize. Stories of Abraham and Moses. Stories of Noah and the flood. Stories of Mary and Jesus. It's filled with wise instruction, But from our reading this morning from the Quran, and not equal are the good deed and the bad. Repel evil with good, and the person who is your enemy becomes like an intimate friend. Very much like when Jesus said, turn the other cheek in his Sermon on the Mount. The Quran states that if someone comes to offer you evil or harm, respond with goodness. Respond with love. Now, there's a reason why the vast majority of the world's Muslims are kind, giving, and nurturing people. For their Holy Quran instructs them so. Every time I turn on the television and I hear someone ranting about the evils of Islam, I'm reminded of my friend Rami. Reminded of the warm smile that greeted me as I entered his home, invited me to sit and share a warm cup of tea. Reminded of watching his father quietly kneel on his prayer rug before dinner. Reminded of sitting around his kitchen table while his mom brings out plate after plate of falafel and hummus. And I'm reminded of the love that was so present in that beautiful Muslim home. And I'm also reminded that those angry voices on the television, the ones that tell me to fear Islam, they simply don't know what they're talking about. So may it be. We have a calling in this world. We are called to honor diversity, to respect differences with dignity, and to challenge those who would forbid it. We are a people of a wide path. Let us be wide in our affection as we dismantle the other into the beloved we.